Hello, and welcome to another live episode of BM by BM. I am Bailey.
I'm Maxie.
Oh, I did it right that time.
Yes, there we
Yes.
go. We're getting close.
So this is Books and Movies by Bailey and Maxie.
Yes.
So this episode 14, is about The Man in the High Castle, and it has been Philip K. Dick week because we also discussed Blade Runner on Tuesday.
Yes.
So, yes.
Very good. So another unique feature of this particular episode is that I will be discussing the television series while my colleague, Madam Bailey, will be discussing the book.
Mm-hmm.
So, general background. Man in the High Castle is a story that is set in an alternate universe or alternate timeline, shall we say?
Yes.
In which the Axis powers won World War II, and the United States, the geography of this country has been split between Nazi Germany, that controls the eastern portion of what is now the United States, and the Empire of Japan controls the western part, and in the middle is a neutral zone, right? Or a no man's land, or something like that. Sort of a wasteland of sorts. So again, this is the story of individuals, so particularly Americans living in this universe, or this reality where they are occupied by a foreign power.
Mm-hmm.
So imagine if the German Reich had been successful, well, mostly successful, and they did in fact occupy several countries during World War II. What if their entire campaign was successful and they occupied this country? What would that be like? And that's part of what the story envisions. Like, what would life be like in essentially that time period? And refresh my memory. What are we talking time period here?
The book is set in 1962.
Yeah.
So it was published the same year it was set in. So it's kind of, again, like you said, an alternate timeline for what would have happened if they had won.
Right. Very good. Mm-hmm. So, all right, elucidate the story. What have we got against that backdrop?
So I read this probably like 2 years ago. But there are a few main characters. One of the things I do like about the book and about this dystopian take is that there is a strong woman who does what it takes to get freedom as she sees it. There is a guy who runs an American antique shop, and it kind of reminds me of 1984, the place where he went to get a journal and a real pen.
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting that they use American artifacts to impress the Japanese or the Germans, because gift giving is very important in Japanese culture.
Right.
So they're always trying to find something that they can give the former Axis powers so that they can win their favor.
Right.
But it is a bleak world. One of the things that shook me the most in the book is the little description they go into the complete decimation of Africa. It sounds like basically there are no Africans anymore in the book. They have gotten rid of Jews, a lot of Eastern European cultures. And so, really, in the United States, or what it is called, I think it's like the Pacific States of America or something, PSA is what it is abbreviated as.
Gotcha.
But it's really just like white people, Asians, that's it. So the world looks a lot different. Diversity wise, there isn't a lot. Yeah, that was crazy to me to imagine what would have happened if the Germans had won and what they would do to other countries.
Continents, yes.
Yes.
Interesting that yeah, that wow, that is not addressed in the series. That the destruction of Africa is not. So yeah, that's kind of a shocking concept, and one that funny in all my thinking about, well, what if that's not one that occurred to me. What would Nazi Germany, what would the Third Reich have done to Africa if they had their way? Wow.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, so it's an interesting thing for me is huh, yeah, this device of alternate timelines as dystopia, right? So um it's fair, I'm sure you've heard it's common to say um the victors write the history books. Yeah. So we think of it's interesting, even though we are talking about dystopians and how they are reflections of the society we live in, we still think of our current reality as superior to the hypothetical reality if
Mm-hmm.
if an event in the past had gone the other way. So how's that for an inception level thought? Like, wow, we're criticizing our current reality, but then we're also saying, ha, could be worse, could be Nazis.
There can always be Nazis.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, there are.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So what is this? What do we need to highlight here? So you've pointed out a couple of things. This idea of gift giving. I'll mention one thing. It's interesting to me how um, the I don't know if it's the way in the book, but in the show, there's this issue of how and I'm blanking on the names of the territories, the Japanese controlled area and the Nazi.
Oceania.
No, in the show or in the book,
Oh.
like the West Coast and East Coast.
So I'm sorry, I was wrong. So it says that in the book, at least, the Pacific States of America are the western part,
Okay.
and then it's the Rocky Mountain states, or like the neutral territory. The United States of America is a part of like Great Lakes states going up to Maine, and then the South in the book, it looks like it's like Ohio down, like Ohio, Virginia, part of Illinois. Weird.
Okay.
This is what I'm looking at.
Nice.
Thanks, Wikipedia.
All right. So the Japanese Pacific states and then the greater Nazi Reich. Is that basically correct?
Yes.
Okay. So the thing that is interesting to me is the highlighting at some point of the contrast between customs and traditions in those two territories. That even and that's interesting to think, like we may have regional customs or vernacular or whatever, but the question is, what happens when an outside power essentially, it's not colonizes in this day, it's that you occupy and that you um, impose your culture over the top of the existing culture, and then just and then the contrast, then how when you superimpose uh, German or Nazi culture over the the East Coast, and then Japanese over the West Coast, even though there was a lot in common, you see these really significant differences, like the way that individuals in the Pacific states interact with those in authority is much different than the way that individuals interact with authorities in the other areas. It makes sense, but it's interesting to think almost these places that. So in my mind, conceptualizing this country as one country, where there are other parts of the world where very, very small, areas smaller than one, even the state you live in or mine are an entire country,
Right.
and reconceptualizing that is an interesting thought exercise.
Yes.
What if there was an international border just not too far to your west, that kind of thing. What would that mean? So,
well, there was.
yes,
but
yeah.
no more. I'm referring to Mexico.
Right.
Cinco de Mayo.
Right.
Anyways.
Yes. Okay. What else so again, we're in an alternate timeline, and
Yes.
the thing we do in our show seems to be, what is this? A little bit of the plot, a little bit of the that's interesting, and then on to so what kind of thing. You got any so what's there for us?
I remember when I finished the book, it was kind of just like there was no beautiful bow wrapped ending. This is the way that the resolution comes. The United States get back to whatever we were. So if you're looking for that kind of ending in this book, it's not going to be there. But I do think it is a great what if piece of literature. I mean, he thought out a lot. He talks about who would have been in power if the Nazi party was still at work. So a lot of the people that we've learned about in history classes are the people who are really alive and part of the Nazi regime actually have positions in government. And of course, the Gestapo is still at work. There is not as much detail into the Japanese government. I feel like it's more German heavy in the book. But I mean, the Japanese are still in power and over the Western U.S. I think another interesting part of it is, which they don't necessarily mention that much, but retaliation for internment camps in the Western United States. Of course, they had internment camps where lots of American citizens with Japanese ties were encamped during World War II. And so there's definitely a hierarchy of Japanese being above traditional white Americans with a European background. So I wonder how much the author thought of that when he was creating this storyline, because there is no talk of reparations. There's no sort of recompense for that. It's just that they're not in power. The white people are not in power. That there are more Asians who are over the government and in higher positions in general.
Mm-hmm.
The end.
Yeah. Um, well, for for me, a quick thought about and I will full disclosure, I have not. So there are 4 seasons of the show have been released so far, and I, I believe I've watched. It's either 2 or 3. I've certainly not watched the last season that's been released. So perhaps there's some brilliance that I've missed that would uh, aid us here, but um, I don't know. On one level, I would say um, perhaps we should be cautious about um, the thing that I mentioned earlier, like assuming that um, the present reality we have built is somehow superior to the
Mhm.
hypothetical reality that would have been if someone else had won or been in power at a certain point in the past. Who are we to be confident and proud of what we have done with our society and with the power we have held? It's just, uh, please don't hear me say anything. This is not meant to be at all complimentary of the Nazis or what they did do or aspired to do. Um, but in this post-war society, can we say that the society depicted in these books, you know, is like, no, we sure are way better than that. We sure never wronged any Africans, and we sure didn't slice up land and just do whatever we wanted with it, or whatever else is there in the show. So, am I bugging you? I don't mean to bug you. Sorry,
No,
reference
just
YouTube.
gerrymandering indeed, sir. Yes.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. And so that is a instead of a point a point not to ponder. I don't know exactly what that was, but um, and then also, yeah, this notion though of um, artifacts from
Mm.
America. Like what would be artifacts? And it's interesting to me. Um, the things that are valuable, and if I'm remembering correctly, one of the things that's very valuable is something to do with cowboys and weapons and that type of.
There's a gun that's, yeah.
Right. So this whole concept of, what, of all the actual objects that are preserved or could be preserved, how do we know, what constitutes value, and is just oldness, just oldness make something valuable, or is there some level of iconography or symbology in what a society will value in an object that is ancient? And what's really interesting to me is uh, the valuing of American artifacts by individuals who are from a civilization that is itself ancient, and and can boast of much more
Hmm.
ancient artifacts itself. So that's an interesting little aside there as well.
That's very true because there are a lot of civilizations that have been around a lot more than the United States.
Yeah. Well, um, final
Heavy
thoughts.
stuff.
Yeah, it is heavy.
Um, I do recommend the book. I think I've seen a couple episodes of the show, but I have not religiously watched the series. I do think it's well written. Um, yeah, it's a good read.
And I also give the series or the TV series 2 thumbs up. It's definitely worth the watch, in my opinion. So
Interesting.
read it, watch it, We don't
Live it.
regret it. Oh, yeah,
Listen to it. No,
Yes.
no, don't live it. No, don't live it. Yeah.
Listen to it. Consume the narrative.
Yes.
Okay, so as soon as this show over, the weekend officially begins because the weekend cannot begin until our show. You've watched our show, unless the watching of our show is the first thing in the weekend, whichever way you like to think of it.
True.
And we won't judge you either way. On Monday,
Tuesday,
we are moving on to somebody's favorite. I don't know if it's either of our favorite, but someone really likes this series. But we're just treating the first book, right? Which is
I mean, we could talk about the whole series, or we can just talk about the first one. Shall we just do the first?
Okay, fine. Let's do the whole thing.
Okay.
So we're talking about Hunger Games next Tuesday. So yeah, okay, that's good. Let's talk about all of the Hunger Games, because then next Friday we're talking about C.S. Lewis's Space Trilogy.
Yes.
And ladies and gentlemen, be careful. We are not talking about the 7-book series, Narnia. That is not a space trilogy. There's a whole different series of books. We're not going to tell you the titles of any of them, because you know what? You're going to have to reach out to us on social media if you're not quite sure, and we will tell you which titles to begin with. So, oh, by the way, if you're big fans of Narnia, or really any of Lewis's other books, don't go into these books considering or expecting to get the same thing. You will not. They are quite different from anything else he wrote.
Wacky,
wild, like trampoline, floating island, nude romps.
Travel. Yes.
Right? Okay.
You have to be basically a naked astronaut to get there, I believe.
And I'm not saying that, you should, that this would be enhanced under any reading this would be enhanced under any certain states of being, but who knows? So that's what's on tap.
Yes.
Hunger Games on Tuesday and C.S. Lewis's Space Trilogy on Friday.
Yes.
And may the odds ever be in your favor, our good friends.
Yes.
See you next week.